Hey everyone, welcome to the Hidden Life podcast, where we interview people who may not be famous but live their lives with intention and heart. Today I'm here with one of my favorite people, Colonel Rodney Robinson. He has had a lot of different titles, and so I'm super excited to have this conversation and you guys to listen in on it. Welcome, Colonel. How are you doing?
Great, young lady. I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you for joining me.
I can't think of any place I'd rather be on a Sunday afternoon.
For the listeners then, can you just do a quick introduction? Tell us a little about yourself, where you're at.
So I was born in 1964, May the 9th, Rodney Scott Robinson. I was born to Sergeant Jerry Rodney Robinson, my dad and mom, in Live Oak, Florida. My dad was actually deployed out of the country with the United States Air Force, I believe in the Philippines, that deployment. Grew up as an Air Force brat, to include, living in Valdosta, Georgia, Homestead, Florida. Moved to Germany when I was 8, lived there till I was 12 years old, both for people who might know Bitburg and then Simbach, Germany. Started middle school and high school in Austin, Texas, and graduated high school in Bountiful, Utah. All of those places were places that my father was stationed at. Other notes, married my high school sweetheart there, Jamie Parker. Went to college, actually joined the Air Force Reserves and served there for 3 years as an aircraft mechanic like my father had. Had a patriotic duty, and they were helping me with money to go to school. Might be of interest. That was about $1,000. They offered a bonus of $1,000 a year, and that $1,000 covered my, 3/4 tuition of $300 a quarter at the time. And then got married and joined the Army National Guard and Army ROTC. Let me back up. While I was still in college at Weber State College then, after which went to flight school, came home, had an educator certificate, had thought about teaching school then, biology, and was actually hired full-time by the Utah Army National Guard as an active Guard and Reserve officer. Did that for 25 years as a aviation officer, performing most duties in an attack helicopter battalion, attack helicopter group, and aviation troop command. Until I retired, which I did in 2010, worked for Department of the Air Force for a short time, doing procurement, project management, and then, as you know, moved to Fort Myers. I will tell you, due to family changes, Sammy Robinson and I were divorced, partly because of those changes in retirement from the Army, moved back what I considered home, Florida, to Fort Myers, where I taught Army JRTC, as you know, at Fort Myers High School.
That's where we met.
For about a decade, just over, and since then have worked at the school district of Lee County in the Director of Army Instruction office, first as the Assistant Director of Army Instruction, in the last 2 years as the Director of Army Instruction. So there's kind of a general broad brushstroke
Yeah.
history of me.
Yeah.
I will just say real quick, we got 4 kids. Corey, he's my oldest. He lives in Utah. He's a market manager for American First Credit Union. Awesome young man. I've got a daughter, Jessica Ruth Robinson. She is a professor of developmental psychology at St. John Stevens University in Rochester, New York. Wade, he's my youngest. He's works for the IRS. He's a business account manager, for lack of better words, for the IRS. And then Hunter Douglas, he's my stepson. Joanne Moran and we got married when I moved to Fort Myers, and her son, my stepson, Hunter Douglas, he lives up this way in Gainesville, Florida. He's a geologist, works for a company that researches sinkholes and looks at mitigation and detection, that kind of thing.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing, just quick snippets of everything you've done. Like, obviously, you've done so much. But I kind of want to go all the way back, being an Army brat. Like, how was that, moving around a lot? I feel like people don't really talk about, I guess, the emotional um, thing that kind of comes with that as a kid.
Um, so there are. First, I'll correct you, because if I don't, some of the people that see this will correct me. I was an Air Force.
Oh, yeah.
My dad was in the United States Air Force, and as I mentioned, I joined the Air Force Reserves initially, as an aircraft mechanic too. But to your point, there has developed kind of a brat subculture, if you will, and there's some good shows out there. Brat, My Journey Home, is a movie that really gets into military life and how it affects spouses and dependents, so spouses and
Mm-hmm.
kids. And I think I was pretty blessed. Our life was pretty steady. Living in Valdosta, Georgia, that was kind of preschool years. I didn't start school till we got to Homestead. Went to Leisure City Elementary School. That was pretty standard. My dad wasn't deployed during those times, but when I got 8 years old, I actually celebrated my 8th birthday in Bitburg, Germany. We lived there for about a year, just a little more than a year, and then moved to Simbach, Germany. And that was fascinating. It was incredible being, as you know, Germany's Europe. It's the same in that they have the same kind of Judeo Christian foundations. Cultures are similar, but they're different. My eyes catching the squirrels out the window. But it's a foreign country, and as a 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, it was awesome. It was early enough that you felt safe, wherever you rode your bicycle, on or off base. Bases at that time, especially Simbach, was a small community, and everybody knew everybody. Everybody, had a similar background, foundation, certainly employment, etc. It's probably worth mentioning here. I really developed what I think is a healthy understanding of inclusion and racism and those kinds of things. Live Oak, Florida, bless her heart, it is the Deep South. And, my grandparents, they lived and espoused those traditions, if you will. That's a whole podcast in and of itself. But of course, we know on a military base, none of that can or will be tolerated. And so it didn't exist. And I didn't notice it at the time, but as I grew up, I could look back and kind of see the differences and the contrasts. And it has certainly informed, both my personal and my professional outlook on diversity and inclusion and tolerance and people in general. Moving back to the States when I was 12, was cool. We moved back. My father didn't live on base other than when we were in Germany. I think he liked getting off base when he was off duty, you know. Um, Austin, Texas is awesome. It's an incredible place. It was, in the mid to late 70s. It was a great place to live, plenty of woods and outdoors and stuff. I went to school with a lot of kids that grew up there, that lived there their whole lives. And I think it was during that time that I started to feel that, a little bit of difference from being a world traveler or citizen of the world versus somebody that was able to set and grow up in a hometown their whole life. I decided then I was going to be a professional basketball.
I have never known that.
I actually worked at a bait and tackle store for about a year and a half before we moved from there. And so all that to say, when my dad came home towards the end of my sophomore year of high school and said, "We're moving to Utah," I was distraught. That was really the only move that we made that really, had a huge effect. I think I had to go get an atlas and figure out where Utah was. But that move also taught me, though, that you got to embrace wherever you go, whatever your circumstances are. If you embrace them, they will have the potential to be life-changing and will always, result in more than you could expect.
Yeah.
So that last move, from Texas to Utah, one of the things I point out, during those summers when we lived in Texas, we would go to Florida each summer to Live Oak to work for my Uncle Claude Starlin, who grew tobacco. And those were cool times. So, those were always that created a common thread between me and what I considered my hometown of Live Oak. Give us time to maintain those bonds with uncles, aunts, and cousins, and kind of at least that portion of those roots in my family. I will mention that my mom, she was born in Los Angeles and grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I won't go through the whole story how she met my dad, but they were two individuals from, really different parts of the world, certainly different parts of the country. And she brought in a culture that was new to and exciting for my dad, and certainly a culture that influenced me in ways that the Southeast, couldn't or wouldn't. So I think asparagus, right? Who in North Florida eats asparagus? But it was a staple to my mom. It was a staple in our house growing up. She was Brussels sprouts and asparagus, and my dad was black-eyed peas and, sweet potatoes. So, that move to Utah was tough. And for the first time, I found myself in a culture that was different enough that I could feel it. My accent no longer fit in. My brother was so affected. Now, my brother is 14 months older
Okay.
than me, and he was affected enough that he finished his senior year there in Utah, and he moved to Florida, where he spent a year and a half before he joined the Air Force. But I suppose he was never comfortable. One of the things being a brat teaches you, though, is to learn to grow, accept, and fit in, if you will. So it had pretty much the opposite effect on me. I kind of immersed myself to include. I joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Was baptized and became a member of the church and developed some of my greatest lifelong relationships there. And those actually held me there for almost the next 30 years, between college, marriage, career, family, kids, etc.
Yeah.
So, yeah, our childhood, it affects us. And if we can see it and feel it, we can see the good for sure. We can see some of the challenges, though, and things that, we can see what brings us joy, and we can see what maybe holds us back, or things that we can work on and improve.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. Going back to, you said that was the hardest move for you, was moving to Utah. Do you have anything specific that stands out to you right now that you kind of look back and reflect on?
So certainly adolescence played a big part on that. We're driven by our central cortex at that part of our lives. And for the first time in my life, I had kind of some what I thought were definitive ideas about my future, where I was going or what I was going to do. And that shift in gears was just hard, especially initially. Like I said, the culture was a little different in Utah. I from Austin, it was typical teenage shenanigans. It's slipping into bars, not to drink per se, but to dance and that kind of stuff. Sneaking a six-pack off to the lake to go fishing, that kind of thing. And then when you get to Utah, it's different. I mean, there were kids in that element, but most kids were more serious about, religion and their uh, behavior,
Yeah.
etc. And so, it took a minute to understand that. It took a minute to, I don't want to say fit in, but to kind of grips to where I was and, you know, start putting other people's shoes on and see why they're thinking and doing the things they do.
Yeah. Would you, yeah,
Sure.
would you say Utah was also a place where you kind of saw like diversity? You kind of talked about that a little bit. Um,
I would say almost
so,
the opposite. I went to Viewmont High School in Bountiful, Utah. So I went from Austin, Texas, where, I don't know what the specific demographics were at Davy Crockett High School in Austin, but my guess is it's similar to what you experienced in Lee County. Hispanic, probably 20 to 30%, African American, probably the same, and, Caucasian, somewhere between 50 and 60%. to Viewmont High School in Bountiful, Utah, we had one young lady that you could categorize as African American. We had some, probably 2 handfuls of Navajo Native Americans, and probably a couple percent Hispanic and maybe 1 or 2%, Pacific Islanders. But it was, way white, which isn't bad, but it was different. And again, kind of that understanding of people and what they know and how they feel. It was just a place of, I didn't know. You don't know. You know where you live. You know what's going on. I'll give you a small example. Really, the largest minority in Utah at the time were Polynesians. They were the missionary efforts in Tonga, Samoa, were great, and a lot of those people joining the church came to the Salt Lake Valley. But when we got to play the inner city schools in Salt Lake, that was kind of the gossip and the chatter, those big Polynesian kids, which, for me, it's just more kids. For them, it was, there's something unique in it. Because everybody in that school looked pretty much like them.
Yeah. Do you think that impacted you and how you kind of show up and interact with like other people?
It made me pay attention. I think because I had, between Live Oak, Florida, which is, very much one way, because of living on military base, which is almost 180 degrees, and then moving to Utah, which was at least 45 degrees out from either of those, it made me really think about me and how I saw and how I felt about, again, race, inclusion, brotherhood, etc. And I hope it's given me a healthy, balanced out.
Yeah.
I told you I might be a little more religious in this discussion than you've seen me before. To me, the greatest commandments are, love thy God, and the second great commandment is love thy neighbor with all thy heart. And to me, that is, that's relief, right? My fellow man, I don't have to do anything else. As a matter of fact, I'm forbidden to judge. Thank you for that. And all I got to do is love anybody. And if you do, you quickly find out that all humans share, 98, 99% the same makeup, and we're all capable. And so I have lived my life to find the best in everybody, I meet, and help them see the light and intelligence and joy and abilities that they have.
Yeah. So, yeah. Do you think, like, I guess, talk about maybe the difficulty in that? Because I know it sounds easier said than done, but.
So it has become easy, but the difficulties that do exist are others' perceptions, for example, there are things and views that I might be uncomfortable expressing in Live Oak, Florida, because I know that very few people there would share. I'll give you an experience. When you came, I love Old Town. You know, I love the nature. I love the river, etc. But it's one of these woodsy
Hmm.
places. You have visited me here, and we've gone to dinner. And I will tell you, most of that time in the back of my mind was, you know, hoping I wouldn't have to jap somebody up for giving you a hard time,
Hmm.
you know. And so really, but once you get over other people's thoughts and perceptions, you know, even those from your childhood and your family, then really, I think that's the only, you know, challenge or struggle that might
Yeah.
exist. And once you're over that, um, you know, perceptions, then I think it's easier, right? It's easier just to love everybody and see the good in everybody and potential.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that shows up a lot in you being an instructor. I've seen that a lot in just how you interact with students. So something that I've always admired about you.
I
Mm.
appreciate it. I, I I'm proud and thankful that you see it and that kind of
Yeah.
that's how I want to be. That's how I'd like to be thought of.
Yeah. Do you think what do you think people kind of misunderstand about, how you show up, especially in that way of just wanting to make sure that everyone feels loved at the end of the day?
Mm. I had I had a discussion. Sergeant Pat Miller works with. This isn't going to directly answer your question, but I'll come back
Mhm.
to your question. I had a discussion with Pat Miller. Pat Miller works in the DAI office at the school district. I will tell you, he's African American. He's a pastor, a great, awesome man. And we were talking specifically about racism. And and I confess, as most people I think would, that when I see somebody, I tend to the natural person in me tends to judge. It has no longer has anything to do with color, but it might have something to do with the way you're dressed. It might have something to do with uh, your ink or um, etc. But what that has taught me is you really got to get to know people. In Southwest Florida, you can run into somebody that's in flip flops and worn out shorts and uh, a t-shirt, and that guy could very well be, a bank owner or a, car dealership owner or whatever. Um, and so it's taught me that you got to know people. You got to ask them questions and have discussions certainly before you judge, because people, they surprise you. And so back to your question, what has been the struggle, with my new attitude is that not everybody is that
Mm.
way. We're all prejudiced, in one way or another. And not all of us have gotten over it and realized that we're all children of God. We all have potential and greatness in us. And you just got to take time and get to know people to do it. So sometimes when you're with people that haven't quite broken that down yet, they still possess prejudice that they hold to. That can be a
Yeah.
challenge.
Have you seen that change a lot? From, you growing up living in Utah for, most of your life, then moving to Florida, which is completely like opposite cultures. How have you kind of seen the world change in, I guess, in positive ways, but also negative ways? Do you think we've kind of maybe taken steps backwards, or do you think we're still kind of moving?
Mhm. All right, so I'll answer that in a kind of a series of anecdotes, and I'll explain the changes that I've seen in the
Mhm.
world, in society, but also in myself. Um, we'll go back to Live Oak, Florida. Live Oak has like the world has come a long way. There were times when, um, if me and my grandma were walking down the street, somebody of a different color persuasion, would step out into the street as we walked by. Um, Live Oak, Florida was a very segregated community, and is very much less segregated now. Um, and that was a lot of my upbringing and early influence. And when that really hit home was when I was in basic training. Um, I got to become a student leader, a squad leader, if you will. And by chance, talking to a couple of airmen, or really about a couple of airmen, to another sergeant, I used the word boy. If I would like to think that they had been Caucasian airmen, I would have said boys also, but the sergeant I was with made a point to correct me, to rightfully correct me, and said, "Those aren't boys, those are airmen." And I had to check myself, right? I had to say, hmm. Um, my bunkmate in basic training was a young airman named Harmon. He shared the bunk next to me, and we were doing chores. We were making our beds, and I said, "This is," and I used the N word, "work," and it rolled out of my mouth before I even thought about it. And he looked at me, and I profusely apologized to Harmon. He was an African American young man from Tampa. And again, I had to stop and check myself, because it was a phrase. It was a derogatory, negative phrase that I had evidently become accustomed and comfortable with. And so I had to look inside myself. I had to look back at my upbringing and make those changes in my heart, that I thought didn't exist. But those two instances were poignant instances that made me, reflect hard. Back to my time in Germany, it was joyful, right? It was joyful going from a time and culture where you were worried about who you associated with, to a time where nobody cared,
Mm.
and you associate it with, whoever you enjoyed being with. And I think that military culture is incredible and healthy. Um, and again, was a huge part of my influence. Um, I, in Utah, I found myself in a position to work towards inclusion, hard. As an aviation officer in the Utah National Guard, I worked hard to include both ladies in our organization, as well as, minorities in the organization. Because I learned that, you know, diversity, different ways of thinking and seeing the world creates better answers, better discussions. And then I will tell you, moving to Fort Myers was, it was comfortable from the get-go. This kind of unofficial study and look at, race, as I got to Fort Myers, you probably didn't notice, but I did. Whenever I looked and made a census, the number of Caucasian kids, African American kids, or Hispanic kids was almost identical. If I was in a group of 10 kids, 3 would be of one race, another race, and a third race. And to watch you guys get along as brothers and sisters was awesome. And just reinforced all those things that I had learned over time.
Yeah.
I will tell you this about Fort Myers that I think is still a bit of a challenge. I don't know. You maybe you can help me understand, having grown up there. It's still a segregated community in a lot of ways, and that bothered me. It bothered me that y'all would melt and mend and work so well together, but I knew when you got off your bus from school that community probably looked a whole lot more like you than it did the group that you were in at school.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think segregated because of a lot of different reasons, and I think
Sure.
specifically, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Economic. I think there is just, like,
Mm-hmm.
a big difference, with how you were raised, with how much money you have, and so that kinda influenced what part of town you lived in.
And so probably like Master Sergeant Miller would tell us, was probably more a result of prejudice than it was racism,
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah.
So does that get it? What you asked?
Yeah, I was just kinda wanted to kinda go back to your time in the military.
So I joined the Air Force Reserves while I was still a senior in high school.
Okay.
I think I had joined like in January or February and actually did several drills, as an Air Force reservist before I went to basic, before I graduated high school. So I think high school graduation was like June 4th or 5th, and by the 10th I was at basic training at Lackland Air Force Base. My senior year. My birthday's in May, so I had just turned 18 when I went to basic training. I did that. I was in Air Force Reserves for 3 years. So went to basic training and technical school for the Air Force, basic in San Antonio, Blackland Air Force Base, and tech school at Wichita Falls, Texas, and got home in October. And by winter quarter at Weber State College, I started winter quarter, I think right after Christmas, started college. Yeah, I really feel like, the kind of reflection I did at basic training and tech school, I, th- I think for the most part, the last vestiges of challenges I had
Mhm.
internally, about race, acceptance, tolerance.
Yeah. And
So,
that was probably influenced just based off of how you grew up in some ways? Yeah.
for sure, you know, um, yeah, the Southeast, you know, buffeted by, living on base, the diverse community on base, again, where that type of thinking wasn't tolerated, much less, condoned, to move into a very, monolithic area, to, these realizations and my attitudes being checked in a way that I really had to look at who I was and what was going on. But I think by the time, certainly by the time I went to the Army Guard and transitioned to ROTC, Army ROTC, I feel like I had a pretty firm foundation. And then leadership kind of, amplifies that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Meaning when you start building teams, leading teams, working in teams, especially in a military situation, you know that everybody has got to be your brother and sister, and you've got to have each other's back. You got to be willing to die for one another, and there's no room for any of that shenanigans or
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of the greater character lessons we need as a
Yeah.
society.
Yeah, for sure. Do you feel like you see that in culture today, like especially with the students that you interact with? Is there still something to be learned when we talk about racism
I,
or even just diversity?
so yes, it's I don't know, is it nature, but it's certainly prevalent and sometimes feels like it's innate. I don't think it is. I think we do it to ourselves from earliest childhood. Um, and I think it's well to get us all to see, to me as an educator, to perhaps allow kids to find themselves in environments where they're not comfortable, so that they see that these kids are people. They have the same concerns, worries, fears that I have. And, as such, we can, should, and get over our fears, concerns, so that we can work together and be a better community and society.
Yeah. How do you think that has played out in your life as a father? Like, how do you think you've kind of helped your kids develop that attitude of, diversity and just kind of loving people regardless of what they look like?
Um, so any of that existed in my earlier life, I certainly made sure that I didn't perpetuate it. I think, as human beings, that is our first and best way at improving, the childhood, the culture of our kids, is to take those things with us that are of goodness and value and perpetuate those, but those things that are divisive and, don't bring us joy or success, allow those just to go their way. And so, I think also share with my kids, the times when, I had to come to those, you know, r- understandings in
Mhm.
myself, and how uncomfortable those might have been, and that they were unnecessary and wrong. Not being not being afraid of sharing
Yeah.
that, you know, and those stories. Um, Traveling, get my kids out of Utah when they were growing up to see and know. I remember my young son. We were at the grocery store, and in the line was a very, very short man. Um, and my boy kind of tugged at my arm, and he looked up at me and looked at that short fellow. And I told him, I said, go ask him. Go ask him why he's so short. Um, and Corey was shy enough and that he didn't, but I did. I said, we were wondering why you're so short. And the man was very gracious, and, mentioned that he had dwarfism and talked a little bit about what that was. But I wanted to show my son that these things that make us different aren't things to fear or worry about. They're things to ask and
Hmm.
learn about. And although it may be uncomfortable, if it's something that, sparks your interest, it can be something that can develop a relationship and understanding, which has always for me led to, friendship and acceptance.
Yeah. Where do you think that like boldness, I guess, to ask those kind of questions to people comes from? Like, do you think that comes naturally to you to like?
Um, so part of it's being a
Mhm.
brat, right? Part of it's being in such diverse communities and um, being comfortable with diverse people and friends. Part of it's, also traveling as a professional to Japan and Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan and places where I don't know if you had the opportunity to watch the Christmas in Afghanistan video. In there's an individual, uh, uh, Mike Pline, and he's very honest about what he thought he would see when we went to Afghanistan. He mentioned that he thought we would see people that hated us, that, were radicalized and that were, you know, these, Islamic American haters. And when he got there, he saw very quickly that they're people, and all they wanted was peace. All they wanted was the opportunity to put in a crop, to vote and to protect their families. I think my bringing in the military and then my professional experiences have taught me that's the truth. We all just want to be able to make a living and support our
Mhm.
families. And that builds a level of society that we can all relate to, and that's our foundation. That's where we go from. Now, take that kind of to the spiritual me. We are brothers and sisters. There is no doubt in my mind that we come from the same creator, and as such, we all have the exact same value. We have a father that loves us all the same, no matter what. So who am I to treat you as nothing more or less than my brother and my sister? To treat you in the way my father would want me to be treated and would want me to treat you.
Mm.
And then, like we said earlier, once you understand that makes it easy. And that, I guess, kind of that confidence gives you the
Mhm.
boldness, to have conversations. I talked to somebody about this just the other day, on a cultural visit in Japan. Um, I asked the father of a household about Douglas MacArthur and what the Japanese people thought of Douglas MacArthur. Historically, he was the military governor in Japan at the end of World War II. He did some some startling things. He went and put his arm around the emperor, who at that time was considered deity, right, in Japan. Big old, tall, lanky Douglas MacArthur threw his arm around him wearing a coonskin coat. Douglas MacArthur did it for a very specific reason. He wanted to show the Japanese people that this is just another man. But a lot of the Japanese thought they
Mhm.
cringed, right? But Douglas MacArthur also was center in the rewriting of the Japanese Constitution, which went leaps and bounds to give ladies in Japan, equal rights. And so it was something that I thought might be an uneasy question to answer, but I really, from my study in history, really wanted to know, what current Japanese society thought of that kind of end of World War II and, the U.S. occupation and specifically the things that Douglas MacArthur was a part of. So I asked the question and got a very, intelligent answer. And so, that's the way we learn, right? That's the way we gain understanding of our world and each other.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, have you had hard conversations in the military specifically?
I say that the only hard conversations I've had have been with people that didn't get it. Had a young man at Fort Myers High School. We were doing simple relays, and the relays required everybody to hold hands. And this young man, he didn't want to hold hands with folks. It wasn't everybody; it was particular folks. And having that discussion, I guess, was a little tricky. Not sure I convinced him. Not sure I got him over his phobia or bias, whatever it was. So that was a tricky conversation. Uh, Sometimes, adults that'll come across one way or another, trying to ease into this, brotherly love business. And I think it's just, it's more about kind of getting over the disappointment when perhaps they don't get it or see it.
Do you see that a lot, or was that like few and far in between?
Certainly, you know,
Fair,
rare
yeah.
instances, yeah, those things are few and far
Yeah.
between. And you just try to, influence positively the best you can and let it go. And try not to judge, try to treat them the same you would. They still my brothers and sisters. And I can choose to dislike them because of their perceived notions, or I can continue to love them and create future opportunities to, share my thoughts and opinions down the road.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so just kind of changing just changing topics a little bit. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about like your leadership and mentorship. Something that I've noticed about you is how intentional you are. How are you able to like remain intentional, especially with like your students, and even probably people that you've met in the military?
Um, early on, I decided that leadership was about service, and some of that's pretty direct. It's part of what we get, in ROTC, et cetera. When it's time to bring your soldiers to chow, you get in the back of line, let them get through, that service. You eat faster than everybody else, so you can be out of the chow line or out of the chow hall waiting on them when they get there. If you've got training to give, you're there before the trainees show up to make sure everything's ready and that the training's productive, and you stay there after they're gone to reset. And, so service leadership has always been a foundation. I will tell you, when you get to the high school, you kind of got to double down on that. I in the last year or so have had a lot of discussions about respect, which kind of goes hand in hand with this. I walked into a high school thinking, I'm gosh dang United States Army colonel. I ought to get respect by the way I walk into a room, by the way I carry myself. Well, in Fort Myers, Florida, 2 hours away from any military installation, a ninth grader doesn't know United States Colonel from a bus driver, right? And so I was stunned for the first little bit that these kids are treating me like a knucklehead. And so I had to figure out real quick, a solution, and my solution took me back to service leadership, and that is I've got to show respect, and I've got to earn it. So from that moment on, I knew very few students' first name. Their first name was Mr., Mrs., Sir, Ma'am, Cadet, Colonel, Cadet, Sergeant. From then on, and so I showed respect, and at a very basic level, that allowed me, a couple weeks into school, to when somebody wanted to call me Robinson or hey you or whatever, I could at the very least say, hey, Mr. Johnson, I haven't called you anything but Mr. Johnson since you've come to my class, and I don't expect any more, but I don't expect any less. And so that set a foundation, but truly respect is earned when, first, people know that you care about them. They know that, if you show up to class distraught, if you show up to class late distraught, I'm not going to start dogging you about being late to class. I'm going to ask, hey, what's going on? You all right? Can I help you out? So first, I got to show that I care. But almost as important, I got to show that I've got something in me that is going to help you. I've got some ideas, some thoughts, some beliefs, some talents, some skills that I can teach you that are going to make your life better. So once I've done those two things, once I've showed that I care about you and I've got some goods, I've got some talents and skills, now we start, now I've earned respect. And the last thing is that, my respect shows you that I value you, and it can't be token. I've got to believe it. I've got to believe that Sylvia Altenor, that the 9th grader or 10th grader, Sylvia Altenor, has something to teach me, that, something in you, your upbringing, our diversity, our differences, your parents, your life experiences, I've got to look for that in you and know that it's there, so that my respect is genuine. Does that make sense?
Kind of showing some humility regardless of like what you've done in your life, realizing you can always learn something from someone else.
I
Learn
will
something.
always learn something from other people. And when I believe that you have that value, and when you see, and I can tell you when you've done that for me, then that, respect circle becomes complete. Then we are brothers and sisters. Next thing I would add to that is building teams, right? To me, that is one of the coolest things about JRTC and the character education aspect of JRTC is based on teams, whether it's doing drill in a squad or working with your friends on your robotics team, or working with your cadets to pass this test or that test, or getting each other to show up in uniform. The program is so diverse that there are things that everybody's going to find easy, that they have talents and skills for, and everybody's going to find things that are a challenge for them, that are hard, that are difficult. The smart kids are going to find the physical stuff hard. The physical kids are going to find some of the academic stuff hard. And when you build a team, when you build a society that depends on itself, you have to identify both of those in yourself. And when you're doing something that you have a strength, you got to lean forward and be the strength and be the supporter and the helper. That way, when you're doing something that is a weakness, you're obliged to let others help you. And both are important. It's important that I help when I can and I accept help when I need it. And so if there's a group of 10 of us and you're on a Raider team, when it's something that for me is, heavy, I'm there, I can do it. But when it becomes agility, folks that are spry and nimble like lead the way. And that creates that team and shows the importance of everybody and allows us to lean on each other and develops that camaraderie, that love for one another that makes us family.
Yeah. And you would tie that back to what we've been talking about your faith as well, kind of bringing that into being intentional.
That's why we're
Yeah.
on earth. That's why we're on earth. Our Heavenly Father gave us these bodies. I would suggest, and my religion would suggest, we asked for these bodies. We asked for this opportunity to come to earth so that we could learn the things that our Heavenly Father would want us to learn. And that is the physical challenges of this earth, physiology, physics, etc. The demands that puts on us pushes us to work together to survive and to thrive. And that builds the team that we call society. And if we could just look at ourselves and our community and contribute when the situation allows it, meaning it matches our strengths, and we accept help when we meet a societal challenge. Golly, right? Think how tight and how simple and peaceful things would be.
Yeah. So how do you balance it? How do you balance family, like being intentional with your family, with being intentional with your students and keeping in touch for 10 plus years? Or have you still not figured it out yet?
Let's go back to, let's talk about balance for a minute. I will tell you, as a military officer, I was probably a failure. As a young, testosterone driven, steely eyed killer, if you will, I saw my job as very important. As an active Guard and Reserve officer, preparing, each month for the minutes that I had traditional guardsmen and preparing them to go to war, if you will. I thought that was pretty important business, to the point that I am positive I have forsaken my family, sometimes during that effort. And I think if my kids are honest, they could point out instances where they felt like I could have been home a little more. So as I got older, I tried to, compensate, bring that more into a balance. As I got, by the time I got to teach JROTC, my kids were pretty much grown. But I try to reach back to them and out to them on a regular basis, not as regular as I would hope. And quite frankly, that is a goal in retirement, is to make them the focus that I wasn't able to make them in the past. I want to be the best granddaddy that ever lived. And it's easy. I know it's easy to say, but it's a goal. Keeping up with you guys, keeping up with students, that's easy, because as I mentioned to you before, you are part of my value. You're my purpose. I've always been fascinated, even from watching my peers, then watching my kids, and now watching you guys go about your lives and do the great things that you're doing. I was showing a slide. I've got a set of slides that I take to communities. When I talked to, like last week, I got to talk to the Daughters of the American Revolution. And I've got one slide that just has a bunch of pictures. One of the pictures is a picture of you and me at your wedding. And last week I bragged on that specific picture because I knew I wanted to brag about me getting to be on your podcast. And got to tell them about, you being the first generation in your family to go to college and to get a commission, and serving as an MI officer in Germany, and now going to school as a physical therapist, etc. That's easy. That's on the outside, it's anecdotal evidence of the value the program has. On the inside, it swells my heart to know that I got to be a part of your experience, and that you have done such incredible things. And there's a whole slide that probably 30 of you on that slide, and I'm excited about every one of you.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, what do you like, I guess you're about to retire soon. Looking back, like what do you hope that you're leaving on us? But also, yeah, like you talked about your kids, your grandkids, what do you hope we remember the most, if you were to like leave something for us to remember?
Um, I I think that teammanship and brother and sisterhood, that we all belong to a community, and the way we're going to find our greatest joy is to find where we fit and how we contribute to that community. One of the things I've been trying to get going is a alumni reunion for you guys at Fort Myers High School, and that reunion thought is specifically that, watching you guys go out and thrive, but bringing that back to your school, to those kids who were sitting where you were sitting, 15, 20 years ago, and being that example and giving those lessons and tools in probably the most powerful way I can think of. And if I think this year, I think we turned a corner. I think we've got enough local folks that see the vision and are interested enough that they can perpetuate that. For those of us that are out of town, that have busy lives that have taken us different directions, I hope that the second Friday in December will continue, and when and where you have time to come and contribute, you'll be able to do so.
Yeah.
So little things like that. You asked a question, or you asked me to come up with a question. I'll just hit it real quick. What have you contributed to bring joy and success to society? And when I reflected on me, it is kind of what you alluded to. It's raising good kids who are going to raise great grandkids, who are going to raise great kids, who are going to raise great kids. But also being a part in your lives as students, so that you can find any wisdom that I have and perpetuate the wisdom that creates joy and success in your life. And if y'all do it, if your kids do it, their kids do it, or you do it and your soldiers learn that from you and they teach it to their soldiers who take it to their communities, I think that's the way society gets better, or the way we contribute to a better society is we, plant seeds that we believe are truths that have brought us joy, hope that they bring others joy and that they perpetuate.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to kind of like wrap this up, especially like with you looking forward to retirement. Like what are you most excited about when it comes to retirement and just kind of leaving this wisdom of, basically doing good for other people so that they can continue that cycle?
All right, a very selfish standpoint, we'll kind of go full circle back to high school in Austin, Texas. I still love fishing. Eh, and I'm excited to do that. I think I might have shared with you, I had a boat built last year. It sounds fancy. It's not. There's a great company up in the panhandle of Florida, and they allow you to draw plans, and they use some pretty high-tech computer machines to cut and weld and put boats together. So I've got this fishing boat now that is a fishing machine. I'm ready to work it out. Um, but I hope to help. I will help perpetuate the alumni reunion at Fort Myers High School and hope to be a part of that for decades to come. I hope to be a part of your life till I or you perish, and to continue to see and watch and be amazed at you as you progress. And that goes for all your fellow students and anybody that would relate to me. I hope to be a great granddaddy in retirement, and I've got 6 grandbabies, and I want to be as much of their lives as they and their parents will allow, and just share peace and joy and tolerance and acceptance in a way that few people in our lives can, like a grandparent, can you? Last thing, I haven't mentioned this much, but I guess it's probably time. I would like to put some of this down in writing, specifically for my posterity, but also for anybody else who might find value in it. I have found sometimes when I share goals, that's one of the ways to kind of push them along. If I share a goal and then people ask me about it down the road, it kind of nudges me forward
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you taken your grandkids fishing yet? Okay.
Yes, for sure. One of the chapters in that I will write is the river has taught me everything I need to know about life. And it kind of goes along, to work and fish on the river, you got to pay attention. You got to be intentional, right? You got to see what's coming ahead, and you've got to react accordingly. And if you're doing it subtly, smoothly, but constantly, it makes, for a smooth, steady ride. If you're not paying attention or overreacting, you're jammed up in the bank, you're, upside down, you're behind the boat. So yes, taking grandkids fishing, it will definitely be part of the experience.
That kind of reminds me of, I remember we went kayaking or something, and then it started pouring. Do you remember that? Definitely had to stay calm then.
And we stayed on the water, didn't we? And by the time we got down to Manatee Park, the sun was out, and we were playing on that little sandbar, and it was a beautiful day. But there's a life lesson, right? So, So Joanne and I, as we're making this transition into retirement, we're looking, very purposefully at where we're going to settle and what kind of grandparent house that looks like. And we're trying to find a place on the water that is as attractive to grandkids and kids as we can make it, so that so that they'll come see us. And then, of course, Joanne's a goer, so we'll be more than obliged to go to New York or Utah or
Wherever life takes you, wherever the grandkids take you.
wherever those
Yeah.
kids are at. One thing that's been nice is our kids have been willing to travel with us. Corey and his family, my oldest, they came and went to Germany with Joanne.
Oh, nice.
You know, I know, we haven't mentioned it here that Joanne and I met in elementary school. You know, almost 50 years went by before we reconnected. But being able to take my grandkids to Germany and see some of those places that she and I saw as children, that's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about, honestly, especially as we talk more about your just time with like family, that I feel like we didn't really touch on. But go ahead.
Well, I'm not, as you get down the road into other podcasts, if you want to come back.
Oh, I definitely will. I'm kind of already thinking about it. Well, that brings me to my last two questions for you, which one of them you already answered. But I have been asking the same two questions to everyone. So the first one is, what's an ordinary moment from either this week or this last month that has meant a lot to you? So something small, but it has meant a lot to you.
Um, I've kind of touched on that answer. So last Wednesday, I got to talk to the Daughters of the American Revolution at one of their luncheons about JROTC. And I got to that second slide in my slide deck of, all those pictures of you and Clancy Cornell and Frederico Gretsch and I got to talk about you. And up to and including, this opportunity this afternoon. And I got choked up. And the tear of joy, came on my eye because this is it. This, you are my joy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's so sweet. But no, I I feel the same way. Like, I don't think you realize the impact that you've had on my life as well. Like, I think of you as a second dad. Not only are you like one of my favorite people, but you've definitely been like a second dad to me, and you've seen like so many different like times of my life and have been there for me through some of the tougher times in my life too. So I appreciate you, and I again appreciate you just being here and supporting me as I step into something new and creative. So
This is awesome. I'm so excited for you. I there's something I would do if I had more confidence and bravery, I guess. So I'm excited to see you do it, and excited to be a part of it with you, be able to get drug into it with you.
Thank you.
I've developed, I listened to several podcasts, a lot of podcasts on character development and education, some podcasts about fishing, and have thought that looks interesting, but I know how challenging it is. So I'm excited for you and excited to be a part of it with you.
Thank you.
Still not sure I'm brave enough to take it on.
Well, you're starting a book, so that's brave too.
I said I'm starting a book.
You will be starting a book.
Okay. Yes.
But the last question, which you already answered that one too, the pass it on, which if you guys listen to the next episode, I'm going to pass on Colonel's question to the next guest. And if you want to reshare that question for everyone to remind us what that question is.
So just what is it you feel you've contributed to the joy and success of your community, your society, the future? And yeah, for me, it's it's Sylvia Lena Halternor Russell.
Well, thank you. Thank you again. That'll kind of wrap us up. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you not only being a part of my life, but just the lives of so many, including your family and all the students at Fort Myers. So we really appreciate you, and gonna be sad that you're retiring soon.
So it's a total honor and adventure. People, and you get it too. I know people tell you thank you for your service. Dude, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine doing anything that's been more of an adventure and more exciting and more rewarding than the life that I've been allowed to have. And I suppose there are moments where you feel burdened, but really it's led me to incredible places, incredible situations, and absolutely incredible people. And so it's my honor and pleasure. It's my adventures. So it makes it easy.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Me too. I'm glad to be part of it.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. We'll see you on the next episode.